Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to your final week of being second graders. I am so excited for you guys to be third graders. I know you're going to do a great job. You guys have done such a great job so far, especially shifting into online learning, which I know has been really difficult. So I'm super proud of you guys. And we are going to read a book this week. This is just a read aloud, so you don't have to do any graphic organizers. All you get to do is just listen to this fabulous book. So the Frankly Frannie series has one more book that I want to read you guys, and it's called Frankly Frannie, Doggy Daycare. And I thought this would be a great book to end the year with because I know many of you like dogs. I like dogs myself, so I thought this would be kind of a fun book to read. Let me go ahead and read you the back of the book just so you can get an idea of what we're going to be reading. All right. Frankly Frannie, can someone please get this girl a job? She already has her resume, business cards, and mustard packets. They're so much more grown up than ketchup. So why is it taking her 1,100 years to find work? Frannie has a new plan, and this one just might work. She'll take her aunt's limping dog to the vet, who'll be so impressed he'll have to hire her. Will Frannie's doggy daycare scheme succeed, or will it end in doggy disaster? We'll have to read to find out if her doggy daycare ends up as a disaster or if it works well. Alrighty, let's jump right in. Frankly Frannie by A.J. Stern, Doggy Daycare. Chapter 1. It is a scientific fact that I had 3 fantastical ideas in one day. It all started the morning I returned Herbert, our class rabbit. Everyone gets a chance to take him home for one entire night. When it was my turn, our teacher, Mrs. Pellington, said, "Frannie, do not do anything with Herbert, other than feed him, watch him, and clean his cage." I looked at Mrs. Pellington right in the eyeballs and promised her I would not do any of her do-nots. It is a good thing she said something because I was going to practice a new hair cutting style on Herbert. I am so good at cutting hair, I am considering being a professional hair cutter. The only thing is, I don't think they'll have offices. And if you don't already know this about me, I love offices. I think we already know that about Frannie. When I returned Herbert the next day without any haircuts or even 1,700 teeny tiny ponytails all over him, which is a for instance of a new style I'm working on, Mrs. P was so impressed that she said in front of the entire class, "Frannie, I'm extremely proud of you. You are clearly very good with animals." Clearly and extremely are very grown-up words. I try and use adult words as oftenly as possible. My best friend Elliot was clearly extremely happy for me because when I looked over at him, he gave me a double thumbs up. My smile was so big it almost wrapped around my entire head, and that is when I had my first fantastical idea. My dad always says people should put their talents to good use. Certainly, I hadn't realized I had so many talents with animals, but once I found out I planned to put it in good use. So I decided to unbecome a hair cutter and become a veterinarian instead. Although I'd never been a veterinarian before, I knew for an actual fact that they had offices. I knew because my parents actually know a veterinarian, Dr. Katz. In my head, I spell it Dr. C-A-T-S, but it is a scientific fact that he spells it with a K and a Z. And if you don't know this about me, you should probably also know that last week I had planned on being our mayor's assistant, but he actually never called me after I sent him my resume. A resume is a list of all the offices you've ever worked at. So my parents said I should think about other jobs. During recess, I told Elliot that I was changing jobs. He asked me if he could become a doctor with me at a veterinarian's office. I told him no because I really needed a secretary. Then his eyes nearly flew out of his head across the room, down the stairs, and out the door. "I have always wanted to be a veterinarian secretary," he said. even though I knew that was not a scientific fact. Last week, Elliot wanted to be the assistant to the assistant of the mayor, and yesterday he wanted to be an assistant to the hair cutter, also me. That is because, and I am not saying this in a bragging type of way, Elliot likes to copy a lot of things I do. Wanting to have a job is just one of those things he copies. It's okay with me because my father says Elliot's copying is a compliment. And also because he only wants to be an assistant. We can practice when you come visit me, I said. Elliot was staying at my house this weekend because his parents were going out of town. The timing couldn't have been more extremely or clearly perfect. Chapter 2. When I got home, I was bursting out of my own skin to tell everyone my good news. That's why instead of yelling out, "I'm home," I yelled, "I'm a veterinarian." I ran up the stairs, down the hall, and into my room. I had an incredible, extremely plan. I was going to open my own veterinarian's office in my bedroom. If I wanted it to be ready in time for Elliot's visit on Friday, which was the day after tomorrow, I needed to get busy. Since I had never been to a veterinarian's office before, I had to take some good guesses at what one would look like. I took all my stuffed animals off my bed and put them next to each other on the floor. They were now officially sitting in the waiting room. I didn't know if veterinarians wore stethoscopes, but I was going to be that type of veterinarian who did. I opened my sock drawer and pulled out a pair of tights. I put them around my neck with one leg draping down each side. I tied the feet together to look like the round part at the bottom of a stethoscope. I pushed my desk to the center of the room because that was the examining table. Then I moved one chair next to it. That's where I would sit and take doctor's notes on all the animals' complaints. Okay, maybe the actual animals wouldn't complain, but their owners would. I put another chair on the far side of the room where Elliot would sit as my secretary. I pulled out some paper and drew a lot of dog bones on them, then cut them out carefully, putting each bone picture in front of all the waiting dogs so they didn't get hungry. I was only going to be a dog veterinarian. Cats are too slippy. Every time I try to hug one, they always slip out of my arms. That is why I was only going to have dog patients. I sat down and looked around. What was missing? A doctor's coat. I heard my parents talking in the kitchen, so I knew the coast was clear. Then I ran down the hall and into their bedroom, where I took a white button-down shirt off of one of my dad's hangers. That would be my doctor coat. I put it on, and with the tights hanging around my neck, I looked actually and clearly like the most professional dog veterinarian anyone has ever seen. Back in my office, I made the official sign for my office. Back in my room, I made the official sign for my office. It says, Dr. Frannie B. Miller, professional veterinarian, dogs only. Elliot Stevenson is the secretary. I practiced listening to the dog's heart, but after a while it was boring. I needed to practice on real animals, in a real veterinarian's office, and the only way to do that was to actually work for a real veterinarian. Notice how she has the cutout bones there, and she has all her stuffed animals lined up to check out. And that is when I had my second fantastical idea. I was going to retire from school and work for Dr. Katz. I actually had a resume. I just had to think of the perfect way to get my parents to agree. Chapter 3. That night at dinner, I told my parents I had a lot of news. I was going to tell them in size order. Smallest news first, biggest news last. I have opened a dog's veterinarian office on the second floor. It's for live dogs, not stuffed ones. That is really a problem because I don't have any live dogs. I told them during the salad part of dinner. This was the part where they were supposed to get their own fantastical idea. My mom was supposed to say, well, maybe you could take some time off from school and work for Dr. Katz. What do you think, Dan? And my dad was supposed to answer, I was going to say the same thing. But my dad just said, that is a problem. We only have stuffed animals in this house, I continued. My parents looked at me with twisty smiles at their mouth corners. Those are good observations, Frannie, my dad said. I wonder if there's a kind of place that is not a zoo where there are lots of animals. That would be a good place for me to go work at, being a dog veterinarian, since I actually and clearly can't do it here. You really need live dogs if you're going to practice being a dog veterinarian. You can't do that at the zoo because there are not any dogs at the zoo. I wonder where you can do that. Do you happen to know? I asked both my parents. This was the part where they were supposed to suggest that I give up school and work for Dr. Katz. But they didn't do that either. All they did was this. A place that's not a zoo, my dad said, scrunching his eyebrows together. I'll have to think on that. It would have to be a place where there were dogs and animals. It would have to be a place where there were doctors and animals. A place where the doctors were the doctors for the animals. But again, not a zoo. That is the exact type of place I need to work at. But if I worked at a place like that, I probably wouldn't have much time for school. Okay, Frannie, like I said, we'll think on it. Then my dad turned to my mom and said, Did you hear that Bill and Janice are going to Italy for 2 weeks? I did, my mom said. Rome. It's so exciting. Oh no, what was happening? The conversation was changing. If they didn't think I was serious about working for Dr. Katz, they'd never let me do it on my own. The only way to prove my seriousness was to show them how much I know about dogs. Did you know that dogs come in all different sizes? I interrupted. Even in Rome, I added, so they didn't think I was too interruptish. I did, my dad said, helping himself to some spaghetti. Just like people, he added. Some dogs are so little that you can carry them around in your pocket and you don't even have to walk them. Is that so? My mom asked, taking a sip of her seltzer water. It is a scientific fact that seltzer water is a grown-up version of water. It is so. Did you know that there are 1,000 million types of dogs? Someone in my school has a dog that is half poodle and half a different kind of dog that's called a labradoodle. A labradoodle? What a funny name, my mom said. Like I said, there are 1,000 million different types of dogs. Labradoodle is just one of them. I certainly know a lot more types. I didn't know you were quite so informed about dogs, Frannie, my mom said, impressified. This was working. I'm quite informed, Mrs. Pellington said. I'm very good with animals, a natural. I added the part about being a natural. My favorite types of dogs are golden doodles and sheep poodles. I didn't actually know if these were real kinds of dogs, but when you're as good and natural with animals as I am, you're probably usually right. I also really like skigadoodles and puffadoodles. Wow, I've never heard those types of dogs. Are you sure you're not making these up? My dad asked, with a small twinkle in his eye that said, even if you are making these up, you seem so responsible and smart about dogs. If you happen to ask us if you want to quit school to get a job as a veterinarian's assistant, we will say yes. I told them a little about schneedoodles and bagel eagles. But when my mom turned to my dad to say something else about Rome, I stood up. Sometimes you need to stand up to make announcements. I am so sorry to interrupt you, but I have something to tell you that is very extremely official. My parents looked at me with their waiting faces. I was quiet for a minute, and that's when I realized I'd need to use my English accent. English accents are very professional. Ave destoyed to retire from school because I am going to walk for Dr. Katz. I announced in my absolute extremely professional English accent. I waited for them to respond, but they didn't say anything. They just sat there with very confused expressions. That's when I realized they didn't understand my English accent because it was too amazing. They probably needed me to repeat it without the accent. I've decided to retire from school because I'm going to work for Dr. Katz, I said in my regular voice. But instead of saying, let me call school right now and cancel, or, that is the best and most professional idea I've ever heard, my dad just covered my hand with his and said, Frannie, you are a true original. You sure are, Frannie, my mom agreed. I learned the hard way that original means one of a kind. One of a kind is good if you are a person, but bad if you are a wet paper, especially when the original paper has extremely professional office words on it. You guys remember that part from our first book that we read when she spilled water on the office papers? And gets ruined because someone spilled something on it. Which is a for instance of something I did by accident when I was a kid 1 month ago. These were not the reactions I wanted. When I opened my mouth to say more, the phone rang. My mom hates it when people call during dinner, but I love it when people call, no matter when. That's because when I answer the phone, my parents let me say, Miller Residence, this is Frannie, how may I direct your call? Because that's how I've heard office people answer. But I was not allowed to pick up the phone during dinner. The phone stopped ringing for a few seconds, and then it rang again. Then it stopped and started again one more time. My parents gave each other emergency looks. When someone keeps calling, it usually means something is wrong. Boys and girls, that is where we're going to stop today, and we will continue with chapter 4 tomorrow. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you're staying safe and healthy, and I'm excited to continue reading this book to you tomorrow. Bye, guys.